DICE has released a blog post outlining some of their future plans for Battlefield 2042, specifically around map design. They address map traversal, combat intensity, line of sight issues, having a clear path through the maps, and the cover situation. Hey guys, LevelCap here, and DICE has given us some information regarding their path forward with Battlefield 2042, specifically talking about map design. This has definitely been one of the more problematic areas of the game, and it's good to finally get some more details about what DICE is planning. And although we do get a few specifics about exactly what they're doing to, say, Kaleidoscope, for example, there's so much more information that I would like to know. Anyway, I'll link the blog post in the video description, but I will be going over basically all the information in today's video. Each topic of the post is labeled as specific issues affecting map design, the first one being traversal, basically the slow nature of getting around maps. And here is the standout quote from that bit of the blog. We're currently working to reduce the overall travel time between flags and base spawn on some maps by moving both the base spawn and closest flags. We've already identified a number of obvious candidates that fall outside of our new expected behaviors. And in fact, they did share an image which they get into a little bit more with the details later in the post that shows an example of this. The rest of the subject and many of the other subjects is asking for specific feedback, and I guess in this case mine would be greater access to basic transport vehicles and ones that don't always have to be called in, but instead just resign at capture points or throughout the map in areas where they're probably needed most. The next topic is intensity, and the main point that DICE said is this. In terms of improvements, we are presently reviewing if it makes sense to keep Breakthrough as 128 players versus 64, or if we feel that a reduction to the total number of vehicles that can spawn ensures that their presence isn't as overwhelming and gives infantry players a more important role. In the lead up to the holidays, we introduced 64-player Breakthrough and recently made some changes to the ticket values across the mode based on behaviors that we were seeing in the final objective phase. Right now, we feel that Breakthrough on 64 players provides the best experience of Breakthrough. And without question, the intensity of Breakthrough on certain maps is just simply overwhelming at times. The way I dealt with it was playing Sniper most often, but playing aggressive classes like Assault could be an exercise in patience, to say the least, considering that you would just get killed, usually before you were in your effective range of combat. Now, sadly, the takeaway from this for me is that, well, 128-player Breakthrough was just not tested enough before they launched it, and there's too many problems with it, and it sounds like DICE is coming to the realization that to fix 128-player Breakthrough and make it good on all platforms and well balanced is probably going to be more work than maybe they have the resources for. So cutting 128-player Breakthrough and just switching over to 64-player Breakthrough as the premier Breakthrough mode seems like the best route forward for them. And if that is the situation regarding the amount of resources that they have on hand, I guess I'm for it. It kind of sucks, but I think many players are struggling to run 128 player matches to begin with. So if there's more of an emphasis on the 64 player game modes, then it might just be the way to go with Battlefield 2042. As sad as it is to cut an entire mode from the game because it just wasn't optimized and tested well enough to begin with. Now, the next subject talked about here is line of sight. This is the main thing that DICE had to say about that. Our current plan for improvement is to ensure that there are more opportunities to hide yourself from enemy line of sight while traversing from objective to objective, with a goal of ours being to reduce the focus on long-range combat and the necessity of carrying weapons which perform best at these ranges. As shared earlier, we presently feel that Kaleidoscope is an obvious offender for line of sight challenges and are already making passes internally on improving certain areas of the map, including redesigning our Breakthrough experience to move combat into areas of the map where better cover already exists. And again, they asked for feedback on this subject. I think Kaleidoscope is definitely one of the worst offenders, and Hourglass is probably equally as bad in terms of just the open areas of the map to traverse. It could definitely use a lot of work as well. The next subject is called paths, and DICE says this: we're presently looking to bring improvements into the paths that we have on our maps to make clearer and more defined paths while traveling between objectives in order to keep combat focused and to make it easier to understand how to get from one objective to the next. Again, very little was said specifically about this, so I'm not sure what tools DICE are going to use to try and create more obvious paths for players to use, but it Sounds like it could be some fairly substantial reworks and placing of different things around the map. We'll have to see. And the last subject is specifically talking about cover, and DICE says this: "We are looking to address this by reviewing the need for additional cover in places where we feel that they're needed. In line with what has been discussed in some of our other focus areas, our intent is to reduce the likelihood of being fired at from 360-degree angle and to take away the Hail Mary feeling of running onto no man's land in between objectives." And again, I don't think many people are going to disagree with the direction that DICE wants to go with here in terms of adding more cover to the map. I think everybody's been saying that from day one. They've just provided a single example here of what they're doing for Kaleidoscope on both Conquest and Breakthrough. And specifically with Breakthrough, they've reworked to show both the A objectives and initial spawn are now on the south side of the river, removing the first skyscraper from play. Hopefully that's totally out of bounds, since it could provide some really annoying sniper vantage points. And the final C1 and C2 objectives have been reworked so that C2 looks like it might take place in one of the skyscraper lobbies instead of out in the open. The previous C2 update seemed to be more of a placeholder to solve the top of the skyscraper capture point problems. And then again with Conquest, they've moved most of the capture points to the south side of the map, with just a few of them being on the north side where there's less cover. The south side has more of that tree kind of bushy area on the southwest part of the map. And then you got a few skyscrapers and tall buildings on the southeast side of the map. I hope these objective movement locations are also accompanied by additional cover. I know they mentioned putting cover in there. I'm just worried that DICE might just be talking about moving objectives around instead of actually doing some fundamental groundwork to the maps to improve the cover situation. Now, DICE also covered a little bit about what they're working on for future maps on the game. This is what they said: "The biggest action point for ourselves is that the bigger maps doesn't necessarily mean more freedom in playstyles or fun. So you can expect future maps to be smaller in scale than most of our release maps. This also means that we are reviewing a possible reduction in the number of sectors and total capture points per map when playing at 128 players. We're also thinking about changing the shape of the maps to give them more a sense of direction. We feel that going from a common Battlefield standard of a square-shaped play space to a rectangular shape, most commonly used in our older entries in the franchise, can better incentivize pushing forward versus circling out sideways. We feel that this can help focus areas of combat, enable you to have more focused awareness, and reduce opportunities for enemy fire to come in from all around you." Now, hopefully this is one of the main reasons why Season 1 content is delayed, is that they went, oh crap, we've been designing the maps like our old maps and those haven't been going well, so we need to completely overhaul the concept behind our new maps and rework them so that they're good and fun to play from the start. I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of the major reasons behind delaying Season 1 pretty substantially. Now, one of the downsides to this blog post is the amount of work that they're doing and when that work is going to happen. They're focusing on Kaleidoscope first, which is fair. That map probably needs the most work. I was hoping to see at least some information about Hourglass as well, since it's probably my least favorite map, but it sounds like we're going to see changes to Kaleidoscope first before we see them to any other maps, and that those changes aren't coming until sometime in Season 1. I was really hoping we would start seeing some map updates before Season 1 launched. I understand map development takes time, but they're modifying maps versus completely redesigning the entire map from the ground up. So I was hoping it would be like, a month or two of changes versus significantly more than that. It's without a doubt a letdown. Longer timelines aren't what anybody wants to see. I just hope that when DICE actually finally gets around to releasing these updates to the content, that it's worth the wait. Now, DICE does thank their community at the end of the blog post, and there's a huge emphasis on this feedback element of this, but it doesn't really line up with how good the feedback has been for previous Battlefield games and community interaction with things like CTE. I don't understand why there hasn't really been any talk about CTE. I understand that it's a bit more resource intensive to have an active CTE environment, that's community test environment, for testing new maps and ideas, but it still seems like the best and safest way to make map changes that the community overall likes, rather than just launching new maps and being like, I hope they're good because the previous ones haven't been, so Why not engage the community in a much more physicalized way rather than just, here's some conceptual ideas, what do you think? I still think CTE is the best way to go forward with fixing this game. I'd also like to know a lot more about map styling. Again, this massive disconnect between the trailer for the game, the cinematics for the game, the things that portrayed this world, this dystopian world, and then the map's not really representing that all. Are there any plans to kind of dirty up the existing maps and change their styling a little bit to make them look more in line with what the trailers showed? And while the maps are certainly one of the big problem areas for Battlefield 2042 right now, everybody is also just waiting to hear about what the plans are for the specialists. I hope we get a more detailed blog post about what the specialists are going to be in future patches, or what DICE is thinking about, so we can at least offer some feedback at this point. I gotta say, I still wish we were in that sort of Battlefield 4 CTE environment where they're working on a map and showing us gray box versions and all that stuff ahead of time. It just felt like a better place to be in terms of the developer-player relationship. Anyway, that kind of wraps it up for this blog post. Next week, allegedly, we're getting a 3.3 patch, assuming it doesn't get delayed again, which is going to introduce the scoreboard, and it's unclear what else might be coming with it. Hopefully there's a good amount of bug fixes, but we're going to have to wait until the patch notes. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this information update. Do you have specific feedback for the developers on map reworks and ideas? If so, let them know, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.